Hi, my name is Pete Mulvihill. I'm the co-owner of Green Apple Books. It's an independent bookstore started in 1967 in the Richmond district of San Francisco, kind of between Golden Gate Bridge and the Golden Gate Park and the Presidio. About 7 or 8 years ago, we opened a second store right across the park called Green Apple Books in the Park. Brilliant marketers. And we, just before the pandemic, in some splendid timing, we bought Browser Bookstore, which is in the Fillmore district of San Francisco. That's been there since 1976. I started as a temp in 1993. I moved here thinking I'd be a journalist. I just deferred a year of grad school and did some temp work, and there was a recession and I was completely underqualified, so I ended up being a temp at a bookstore. I went to graduate school at the University of San Francisco, earned a master's in writing, started teaching there part-time, and thought that that's what I was going to do. And then the owner of Green Apple Books offered to sell the store to me and two of my colleagues in a 10-year owner-financed buyout, which is pretty unusual. When he offered me the store, I think I was making $9 an hour. And he said, "You want to buy the store?" And I said, "You know what you pay me." I said, "Yes, I do." And I figured that out. He also owns a building that is an utter disaster for anything except a 50-year-old independent bookstore. So as the landlord, he wanted to make sure that whoever bought the store would succeed. So there was kind of a long period of tutelage, learning the ropes beyond the basics of bookselling. So yeah, I've been there almost 30 years now, and I did serve on the board of the American Booksellers Association for 6 years. They represent about 2,000 independent stores around the country, and I have enjoyed not being on that board lately.
And I should add, there's a long history between books and browsers with Green Apple. Sort of a soft history, but a welcome one, because books and browsers started at the Internet Archive, which I'll talk about in a little bit later today. Pete was very welcoming to my approach to have a special relationship with attendees then, and I always had felt that it was really important to sort of submit what we were talking about and what we're striving for with people who are actually in the business of bookselling and trying to put the ideas that people have into readers' hands. And so I really appreciate Green Apple for all of those years. And some of you are from this area or have lived in this area, but San Francisco has an extraordinarily rich history of bookselling, and it's very active history, but it's also one that's seen tremendous stress and trauma, just like a lot of communities with strong bookselling traditions. And obviously, some of you have come from New York, another city I know a little bit about, and there's also been tremendous change in bookselling there as well. And I wanted to invite Pete and a couple of other booksellers here who weren't able to be here, a couple words about that in a second, just to bring the conversation up to date. It's like we've gone through this incredible period of COVID, as well as all of the other stresses in publishing. And I sort of wanted to get the feel of like what's changed. And Pete's first comment was, well, nothing. I'm still struggling with like 0.2% profit margins, and life is kind of hard. And yet I do think that something has changed, and some of the conversations we've had over the last couple of months have convinced me that bookselling has changed in ways that are kind of interesting. And so I want to pull a couple of those out. So I just want to note, I tried very hard to get City Lights up here. City Lights is down the street. So if you are, if you're staying anywhere near in this part of the city, please go visit City Lights. City Lights has a very rich literary history here in the community, really profoundly had an impact on the city. And just to give you a slimmer of that, when I was talking with one of the managers there about the possibility of participating, I mentioned this guy named Vale. I don't know how many of you know V. Vale, but I know Brewster does, obviously, and I met Vale at Brewster's, oddly, but Vale published zines, and some of them incredibly influential zines Modern Primitives. He did an early zine on film noir. Really helped shape culture here. And I was going back in memory lane with Andy at City Lights, and Vale came up, and he said, "Oh yeah, you know, Vale sits out a stand right at the corner here, like at the end of the block, normally on most days, and he sells those zines." So these people are still part of the community here in North Beach, and so go to City Lights. But unfortunately, the main buyer for City Lights, who's known to many people in the trade, Paul Yamazaki, has some temporary health issues and couldn't join us today. So I regret that, but welcome Green Apple, who I always wanted to be here. So Pete, one of the things I wanted to talk about was, you know, how in this time, I mean, one of the challenges is bringing people into the store who know to buy books. And it seems like, you know, people who've been historical book buyers will always go to booksellers to grab their books. But this is a little bit of a TikTok generation, which is kind of interesting. And so, you know, do you feel like you need to think through how you're marketing and reaching people, or do you rely, what's working? And what do you feel is like a bridge too far for you as a business with low margins, and you know, you don't have 50 people working and trying to be innovative like Green Apple?
There are only 28 of us. You know, a lot of it is, what hasn't changed is kind of the advantages that we still have over big box stores and especially online retailers, that we have discovery that happens in the store, which I think still doesn't happen necessarily online in the same way, where you go in, you don't go to Amazon looking for something and then decide, oh, I'm going to read this instead, usually. Amazon's great at search and purchase and delivery, but I feel like discovery is still not a strength of theirs. And when people walk into our store, they often get lost, or I hear, you know, 3 out of 4 customers on their way out said, I came in for this book, but then they have a whole pile. So part of it is discovery, and that still happens. We try to get them while they're young. You know, first one's free. Get the kids in. We have a vibrant kids section, do a lot of outreach there. We work with schools. Any school in the city that asks me to donate a gift card, I say absolutely, yes, of course. So there's outreach like that. And we do, you know, when I started, I remember our Yellow Pages cost $7,000 a month, our advertisement. And that went away, and at some point I thought, oh, this is pure profit. And it's like, no, we need to spend that on something else that will get people in the store. So we were, you know, we adapted in the ways that all the other stores have over the years, with email marketing. TikTok has actually been pretty good. We're not great at TikTok, but it has driven a lot of young people in. It's you probably know, it drives a lot of young adult sales into stores. So we're there. There was a very odd book that got a lot of focus on TikTok, a book where it's called Cain's Jawbone, and it's a mystery, and the pages are not in any order. So you have to kind of put the book together yourself to figure out the mystery. And that kind of went viral on TikTok because somebody had seen it in our store and mentioned that. So we sold a few hundred copies of that in a couple days, all of a sudden. We have a website, which sounds silly for me to even say, but you know, in the pandemic, it really saved our butts. It took us 11 years to do $1 million of business online, and then we did it again in 3 months. City Lights, I'm friends with Andy, we serve together sometimes. They didn't have an e-commerce capability on their website. So they went to the community and asked for money, and it worked. But we were able to fulfill orders even while we were closed, which really kept staff. We did layoffs on staff for about 3 weeks, but it kept most people employed and busy. So we made those kind of small, obvious changes using social media, marketing, and then there's just, you know, we rely on word of mouth and on people to bring their friends in and that they have a good experience. At our newer store on 9th Avenue, we built it to have author events, which we had never done on Clement Street because it's kind of a rabbit's warren of nooks and crannies and alcoves and flights of stairs, and it's kind of a place to get lost. The newer store, we realized we couldn't replicate that and kind of make it look fake old. So we made it prettier and added a space for author events, and we do 3 or 4 every week. And for a long time, I was kind of smug about not doing author events because I thought, we don't need to do that. We just packed the store with widest, most interesting selection of books, and people will come. And it turns out that you can really build community with author events, diversify your audience, bring in people, especially online. We still stream all of our events, and we record them and put them on YouTube, and some of them get 20 views and some of them get 1,000. And the goal is not really to get those 1,000 views, it's to maintain those connections to the community. And sometimes the authors, authors bring their friends in and that kind of thing. So it's a lot of what other stores do, basic social media marketing, that kind of stuff. And then the author events have really been encouraging.
So one of the conversations that I had prior to this panel made me realize just how reliant booksellers are on every marketing channel they can possibly leverage and utilize, and how incredibly thin margins are still. And I think if you don't touch bookselling, you really don't appreciate how much this is a business you don't go in to get rich. This is, if you want to sell real books and everything around that experience, you're not going to be buying a second home in a beautiful suburb with the money that you earn yourself from that endeavor.
I have a colleague that says it's a good life, but it's not a good living.
So I was talking with another bookseller who unfortunately couldn't be here either, Praveen of Kepler's Books, who's in India right now with his family. And one of the challenges that he spoke of was something that I think many of us have heard about in publishing, which is the cursed printed price on the book, and how this really frustrates booksellers because there's so very few commodities in stores or where consumers buy things where the blasted price is indelibly stuck on it, and there's no expectation that that price is going to change. And Praveen spoke a little bit about how he was addressing some of the inflationary pressures that people are beginning to encounter, some of the cost of healthcare benefits for the staff. He's actually doing a surcharge, and he had done this on an experimental basis of seeing if he could get away with very publicly saying, I'm going to add small percentage point to the list price of each of these books because we need it to survive as an independent bookseller, and we hope that you will support us. And his readership, his community did that. Now, Kepler's happens to be in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods around Stanford University on the West Coast, so that pilot was a success, and he's solidified it, so it's now part of operations, at least for now. But I was wondering if you could talk about how unique that kind of situation was, and what does it mean that, in essence, there's still, God forbid I say this, a price control kind of effect on bookselling.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the American Booksellers Association collects data from 400 or 500 independent bookstores every year, puts all the data together to create sort of a profit and loss statement for a typical bookstore. And of course, we're all very different. Some of us are in urban areas, some rural, vacation stores, pop-up stores. So there's all these different models. But the most successful stores have a 1.4% profit margin. And that's the most successful stores. And so you imagine, and then as you said, everything in San Francisco costs more. A parking ticket starts at $80. A gallon of gas is $6, not $4. A cup of coffee is whatever it is. But we sell books at the same price that they sell them in Iowa. And I've brought this up sometimes at industry bookseller gatherings to kind of feel out the room and say, what do you think? If they sent you a hardcover and it didn't have a price on it, you could mark it up to $30, or you could sell it for $25. It's kind of your choice. And a lot of the booksellers outside of urban areas said, no, I need that price. That's the only way I can tell the consumer that's why it's $30. I don't set the prices. So they like that publishers are setting the price because then they can ask and get the $28 for a hardcover, or $16 or $18 for a paperback. A lot of the more urban stores, and ones that have maybe more sophisticated POS systems so they could more easily adjust pricing, would prefer no prices pre-printed on the book so that we could set our own prices. You'll see a lot of independent bookstores have a lot of non-books in the store. A lot of stores have 30–40% of what they sell are not books, and they don't do that because they're passionate about socks. They do that because you can mark socks up more than you can mark books up, because you can't mark books up at all. At the same time, we are of course competing with online competitors that have slightly different business models than us. We're able to lose 20 years worth of lose money for 20 years, which we couldn't do. And they're going to sell everything that we have in the store for cheaper. So I think even if I could raise prices, I feel like it's an act of kindness and generosity for a customer to come in and pay full price at my store. They don't see it that way. They say, if I have to pay a little bit more to have this resource and this community gathering space and this beautiful selection of books, I will. But everything we sell in there is cheaper somewhere else. I think Praveen is very smart and creative. When they got into the business, they asked a lot of questions. They pushed back against a lot of the assumptions that had run stores for years. And they're, it's kind of a ship disturber. And I like that. I admire that. I was afraid. We've talked about doing that. And about 15 years ago, San Francisco passed an ordinance that every business that had 20 or more employees had to pay for the health care for their employees, no matter what business they were in or industry. If they didn't pay it, they had to send $2 an hour to the city so the city could create a program. And that was a challenge. We had health care for our full-time employees at the time, but not part-time. And there's the restaurants locally. I don't know if you've seen this. They fought back at first by adding a surcharge, and they weren't doing it. Restaurants can raise their prices, of course, pretty easily. So they weren't doing it necessarily to gain revenue. They were doing it to kind of flip a middle finger at the city and say, okay, fine, if you're going to make us pay for health insurance, we're going to put a little line item on each of our checks. And San Franciscans have just gotten used to it. That charge started to be 2%, now it's 4%, 5%, 6%, and then sales tax is 8.5%. But people from out of town come and they see that the $10 burger, the $20 burger comes with 8.5% sales tax, 6% healthy San Francisco, or it's San Francisco employer mandates, it often says. And then, of course, you're expected to tip 20% on top of that. We can't do that. We can't, or I thought we couldn't do it, and Praveen did it. There's only one other retailer that I know that's done that in San Francisco. It's Crossroads, which is a used clothing company. And I also think, I don't know why they didn't just raise their prices, but it's a real challenge. And when we opened a second store, people thought, oh my God, Green Apple, you guys must be killing it. It's like, no, we're not. And that's why we need a second store. Because if the margins just keep getting thinner and thinner, as our rent goes up and wages go up and health insurance goes up, but our sales don't go up by very much, there's going to be a pinch at some point. So we need to increase our gross sales in order to keep a margin at all. So if you have a small profit margin, but it's on a bigger number, of course, it's a bigger profit. So and that's why we've kind of slowly expanded over the years. We have a store opening in a partnership with Hudson News in the Harvey Milk Terminal of San Francisco Airport in a year, so they say. So and all of this is not because we're voracious, greedy book lovers. It's because we really love this business and we want to stay in it, and it's kind of one of the only ways we figured to do it.
So one of the other conversations that I had coming up to this panel was with this woman, Michelle Walton, who works at a new initiative called the Collective Oakland. And one of the unique things about that store is the way that it surfaced, the way that it emerged. And at a time when a lot of, particularly specialty bookstores, have come under tremendous pressure, if you're selling to an African American community, or if you're selling to lovers of science fiction, or to mystery readers, which are real examples here in the San Francisco community, you may be encountering stresses that are not survivable. And yet there are communities that desperately need serving. Everybody needs and deserves books. And so the Collective Oakland started out in a very different model. Instead of opening up a storefront, a bookshop, and then adding a web presence, they built a web presence first. And so they were basically an online store hoping to become a brick store. So as she said, click to brick. And for them, that was a model that's been reasonably effective today. I mean, very, very much scraping by on extraordinarily thin margins and a tremendous amount of work. But to them, they're trying to reinvent what it means to be a community bookstore. So they have space now. They're totally opening up their doors to their community, but they're also throwing events at the edge of the lake and throwing a picnic. And books will just happen to be there. And they've gotten some grants from agencies supporting their community work, so they'll be able to create a stack of children's books that are free for the community. And she spoke very eloquently. I think as we could all relate to, a child coming up to that stack of books and picking a book off the stack and looking through it, and the mother's first reaction of, I'm sorry, you have to put that back. We can't buy a book right now. And of being able to say, that's free. You can take it with you. It's okay. And of building a community that sees itself as invested in the bookstore and in reading and in sort of the literary richness and history. And there's another bookstore in Oakland that has tremendous connections with African American writers, and it has had folks like Sean Gay and Maya Angelou give readings. And that is part of the vibrancy that is Oakland, that is the Bay Area. And it seems now that there are different ways of having to create community and sort of bridge the community into books. And so I'm really interested to see how those are emerging. I'm just wondering, how do you see that, and do you find other examples of that kind of engagement around books, that sort of how people touch books is changing and evolving?
Yeah, and as an ABA board member, we saw a lot of sort of newer models of click-to-brick or pop-up stores. People who was like, I'm not signing a lease for 10 years. That's insane. I want to be able to be flexible and go where I need to go. So there's definitely been a movement within the younger generation of booksellers to find a different way, to not just try to raise a bunch of money. Online fundraising, though, has been a tool for a lot of booksellers that wasn't there 10 years ago. So yeah, I mean, people who love books, they'll find a way. There's a lot of creativity going on right now.
Cool. All right, so we have about 15 minutes left, so I'd like to open up for questions. Brewster?
Ebooks?
We failed. The ADA tried a partnership with Google 15 years ago. It didn't go very well. I think Google saw that there was nothing there that was going to really help them in a great way. The ABA still has a partnership with Kobo. It's disappointing. Their e-readers are disappointing. I think the real hardcore readers really like the e-readers because of the light issues and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of people seem to read books on their phones and tablets and don't want a dedicated e-reader as well. We tried. I think we still sell a few hundred ebooks a month. On a legacy basis. Like, I basically stopped marketing it to our customers because I felt like it just wasn't a great experience. So we've kind of just ceded that territory. Audiobooks, which has had huge growth in the last few years, that's been much better. Our partnership with Libro FM has been profitable. It's not a ton of money, but every little bit matters when our margins are like this. So we still get a couple $1,000s a year from Kobo, and probably $8,000 or $10,000 a year from our partnership with Libro, and they're remarkably dedicated to the independent bookstore channel. They'll make bookmarks with my store on it and the link to our page to sign up, not just how to sign up for Libro. They partnered on Independent Bookstore Day with promotions and free books. They've done a really good job in partnering there. And ebooks, I feel like a lot of bookstores were just kind of reluctant to try that because a lot of book people don't want to e-read and are stubborn, and they just want to be in their little bookstore at their cash register and talking books with people instead of downloading files or thinking about formats. And really the only way indies were going to do it was collectively. So I think the ABA really tried their best given their limited resources to find a working partnership, and there's a lot of room for improvement there. We just sort of gave up on categories of books to some extent too. Although when Borders closed, we picked up some business, and a lot of, like, we used to not have a romance section until a year ago because Colleen Hoover happened. So, you know, we're always trying to adapt. When I started at Green Apple, we had something like 10 bookcases full of new psychology books. We got deliveries like every 2 weeks from the American Psychiatric Association, and these were $60, $80 hardcovers, Jason Aronson, all these sort of hardcore professional things. And now it's one bookcase, and most of them are sort of pop psychology. On the other hand, our cookbook section, which used to be one case, is now 12 because it's San Francisco. So we do adapt in our categories and the kinds of books we sell, but you know, ebooks overall, I would say, is still a failure. And if you have any ideas, I'll give you the phone number for the American Booksellers Association.
So obviously there's a lot of very tech adjacent people here. So I'm curious what your thoughts are about Bookshop.
Yeah, I was on the board when Andy brought the idea to us, and we wrestled back and forth for quite a while. Personally, I think it's good. I think for some stores, especially smaller stores, it's been excellent. I think for some stores, it is their business, especially during COVID. I think the 5 of the top 10 booksellers on Bookshop are Black-owned businesses. It all kind of happened during COVID and George Floyd, and a lot of stores that didn't have any books on their shelves or were closed, all of a sudden were making a ton of sales to their community on the books that everybody wanted to read at that time. And then they did a good job of it, and they kept it going. So we're a partner. And there's stores I know, like actually, I think the woman who is currently the board president of the ABA, she has a website and it's 2 pieces. It's, if you want to buy a book and you don't want to pick it up in my store, go here, and it sends you to Bookshop. So she has no customer service, she has no overhead, she just gets 30% of whatever books sell from that website. If somebody wants to pick up a book in store or buy a mug from her or something else, they say click here. And so she's sort of given up. You know, our indie commerce site was a lot of work. It's time consuming, the profit margins aren't great. We don't want to be a fulfillment. You know, we did it during COVID because we had to, it mattered and it kept us afloat. But we don't want to be packing and shipping and, you know, books all the time. So having Bookshop able to do that, it has been great. And you know, we get checks twice a year from them, and we've done a couple things that, like I have a friend who works for Human Rights Watch, and she wanted to start a book club for Human Rights Watch, and the sort of pain in the butt factor of picking the books and keeping our website up to date and all that kind of thing was going to be a little bit of a pain. So I just talked to her about using Bookshop, and so she uses that. So I even still send some sales away from our website to Bookshop instead, because frankly, a 30% margin, you know, we get 45% off most books, but then we offer free shipping over certain periods. So actually 30% with absolutely no labor is pretty great. So I'm a supporter of Bookshop. I understand the reluctance that people have, but I think it's been doing pretty well.
Other questions? Zach?
I'm fascinated by the idea if we could remove the retail price from the cover of the book, how that would play out. You must have given that a lot of thought. If tomorrow the publisher said, great idea, we're going to do that, how do you see that happening? How it would change your business?
I've never quite dared to dream. What I would actually propose would be some sort of remove the prices from books that are more than a year old. Something like that. Start gently. When somebody walks into my store and they go to the staff favorites case and they buy a copy of, you know, my favorite novel, The Seas by Samantha Hunt, they don't look at the price. And if it's $15, they're going to buy it. And if it's $17, they're going to buy it. So I would love to have the books that we're promoting and that we're huge fans of and we know we can sell actively, give us price control over those. If the publisher set some sort of suggested retail price, that would be great. The real dream is a minimum retail price, because that would take away an advantage of a certain online competitor of ours. There is, you know, in France, they have, you can't discount more than 5%, I think. And you can't charge less than €2 for shipping. So there's literally government support to prevent that kind of price war. So I don't know exactly how it would look. I mean, a lot of stores, again, I've taken sort of straw polls of a room, and 25% of people said absolutely take the prices off. 25% said please don't take the prices off, and 50% went, I don't know. So it would be a big undertaking because we go through tens of thousands of books. We really deal in volume to a certain extent, and to have to price each one of those, we have to come up with some formula also, and then maybe we're just hitting the same prices that the publisher would have put it on there anyway. And knowing that somebody else is selling everything for cheaper is also kind of a, but I'd love to see an experiment done with a smaller publisher or some really older backlist books, things in the public domain, take the prices off of those and let bookstores try it. It would be a great experiment, if nothing else.
20 or 30 years ago, I believe it was Harper tried it and it didn't work. So it has been tried at one point, maybe more than that.
Hi, I'm Brian O'Leary with the Book Industry Study Group. We actually have a working group on this topic. We met for the first time a couple of days ago, and your description of it is entirely accurate.
I'm sorry for you.
Well, it's hard to get paid.
Perfect.
Andrew, couple here. Rooster and
New versus used? You have both.
Yeah, we started with a used soul and used books, and then eventually added new, and that balance has tilted back and forth over the years. There used to be a Crown superstore that discounted everything 30 or 40% down the street, so we were much heavier used then. When they went away, we tilted a little more new. Now we've tilted more new in the more recent time, partly because of the supply of books. I think the changing demographics of San Francisco and its readers is showing itself in the number of people who bring us in books that still have value. We get a lot of people who are moving and their Zane Grey novels have been perfectly kept in boxes in the garage for 30 years and only smell of must a little bit. As opposed to people who come in every 2 weeks and here are the 3 novels I just read. And some people use this like a library and you just come in cycles. Like there's literally regulars that come every Sunday morning with the mysteries they read this week and they swap them out for others and trade. But we've had a harder time finding good used books. We've actually started, for the first time in the 30 years I've been there, going out of the store to try to find good used books. So we make sure that if it's a book we want to carry, we have it new just in case. I've always wanted books to be as affordable as possible to our customers for business reasons, but also for moral reasons. So the used books are deep in our soul. We do a lot of remainders as well to try to keep the prices down. But we kind of react where the market is, and we are in a city now that has a lot of wealth. It's got a lot of inequality, but there's a lot of wealth, and so people will spend $30 on a new hardcover.
I wondered, I don't know if you've tried this, but it sounded like you weren't trying to do more shipping and packing. It sounded like that was sort of something that you wanted to get out of. But have you thought of, or have you heard of any booksellers doing like subscription-based services or anything like that, where someone is paying you a flat fee and then you're sending them out like a book a month or a few books a month?
We do, but we cannot call it Book of the Month. I've gotten several letters from a law firm in Southern California to stop calling it the Book of the Month Club. So we have an apple a month, which is a book, not an apple. Our consumers are sharp; they get it. We have a subscription that's a new paperback fiction every month. We started with paperback because we really wanted it to be affordable and to pick a hardcover with no awareness of what the price might be and ship it and wrap it and blurb it and do all that. We wanted to start with paperback. So we've had that for 5 or 6 years. It's a little limiting to a certain kind of reader because the books that are published in paperback as originals are often literature and translation or smaller press things, which is great for the right readers. So we try to warn people it's not going to be the new George Saunders, it's not going to be the new John Grisham, it's going to be more interesting. We balloon it during the holidays to 200 or 300 subscribers, and then it fades to at this time of year 70 or 80. We have talked about doing a children's version, which, at least baby's first year, I feel like if you had 2 board books delivered that are developmentally appropriate every month, there's just sort of, at some point, there's limited bandwidth. And if you have somebody, I had somebody on staff who's like, yeah, let's do this. And so we did it. And then it gets built into your daily operations. I tried with the baby's first year package a few years ago, and there was nobody who really wanted to take it and run with it. So there are stores that do things like that. They also, there's stores that do it really individually and custom for you, as a reader. They'll ask you for feedback from the book you got. They'll ask you the last 3 books you read that you really loved, and they'll just send you something each month. And they have something like 7,000 or 8,000 subscribers, and they have literally an index card for each one, and they write down the title they sent you last time and whether you sent back. It's just amazing the time. So yeah, it's an interesting model, and we've dabbled in it, and I know other stores do that really well.
Are there any ways you wish indie publishers were like supporting or connecting with indie booksellers?
I missed the beginning of the question. The connection between indie publishers?
Yeah, are there any ways that like you wish indie publishers were connecting with indie booksellers?
That's really hard. I mean, we're definitely bedfellows. We're all strange. Our buyers pay attention to independent publishers as much as they can. Having a rep that calls on the store really helps. There's relationships that are built over many years. I was supposed to be on the top of the mountain last week with a friend who owns a small press in Portland, but 2 weeks ago. I got COVID, so I'm better by a week at least. So we believe in each other's missions. Almost all of the books that we send to this Apple a Month Club are from independent publishers. But there are independent publishers that don't get what we do, so they barrage us with things that we can't sell. And I'm sure that it goes the other way too, that we miss things that we could sell. So I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. There is a group, I think, the Independent Booksellers, Independent Publishing Association, Independent Publishers something association. Yeah. The ADA is in touch with them at an organizational level, but how you connect one enthusiastic but limited resource business with another is tricky.
Angela, do you want to say anything about that? She's in fire director.
It's true what you said. There's a lot of desire and a lot of effort.
We have room for another question. All right. Thank you.
Thanks for giving me a